Oh, and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am so happy to be here with you all today. I have a little bit of a different lineup for us. I have about 15 to 20 minutes to do this show, and so my goal is to be as effective, as meaningful in terms of our time together as possible so that our time is best well spent. I am also, given that I am kind of running out of time, I have flowers that I'm putting together. I love making bouquets. One of the things that I have kind of rediscovered over the last, honestly, 3.5 years, I guess, which is crazy. It's been that long of being no longer married. One of the things that has really stood out to me over this time is how much, actually, this happened to me last summer. I was on the jetway tarmac, waiting to take off to fly to Greece. And it was so funny. I really felt this compulsion to go, and I didn't know why. I didn't know, what was for me in Greece. But I just knew that for whatever reason, I needed to go to Greece that summer. Afterwards, I went to Italy and met up with my sister, and it was just the most wonderful time. And while I was sitting there on the tarmac, I turned on the Tarzan film, the real live version from probably, I think it's like 2015 or something. And there was this moment where Tarzan he's requested to go back into the jungle. So Tarzan has since moved out of the jungle with his lady Jane, and they now work for like the oligarchy of Europe and is very well known. And he goes and does all these presentations about living in the jungle and now life here in Europe. And he's effectively requested to go back to the jungle. And there's just this and it's so funny, even as I'm telling the story, I feel it in my stomach because I know where my story goes with this in relation to the movie. I'm sitting there watching this film, and there's this moment where Jane looks at him and she's like, "Why will you not go back?" She said, "It's been 8 years. Why will you not go back?" And effectively revisit and confront what you left behind. And what's so interesting, at that moment, I was sitting on the tarmac watching this scene play out when all of a sudden I realized that former life, my former marriage, my body was physically waiting for me to return to it in order to effectively return to stasis. So I had been living 2.5 years at that point in this kind of like sense of waiting, in this period of waiting, and I never really had let myself feel at home or come home, so to say. And the reason why I bring this up, y'all, is because today's topic is really delving into the enemy and the multiple enemies of stillness. What prevents us from being able to get into the quiet and get into the stillness of being able to sit with ourselves and effectively allow our bodies to come to a place of stasis so that we can heal, go deep, go inward, do the work. But if we never allow ourselves to get to that point of effectively stillness and stasis, and I say stasis because there's something about like almost like the rhythmic feeling of being safe, and like I know my body knows that it's in a safe place. The book The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk talks a lot about how much our bodies remember. And so if we're never feeling physically safe, we're never going to actually be able to truly go inward to the extent that we need to in order to learn new things and maybe even remember things that our body is effectively suppressing until we feel safe. And then once we actually can kind of get beyond and start feeling safe, suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't remember that happened. And actually I experienced, or not I, but a friend of mine experienced this. She was going to therapy for about 2 to 3 years. And in the 3rd year, she remembered she had been abused as a little girl. But it was only after years of therapy proving that this was a safe place for her to exist in that she remembered this like very, very traumatic experience. So this is partially why we not only need to sit in the stillness to observe just areas for growth, areas for healing, but in that place, we actually remember almost like and create a new baseline that is safety in and of itself. So as I was sitting on the tarmac about to go to Greece, and I realized, oh my gosh, my body has just been sitting here waiting for me to go back to my former marriage, and then it would heal, and then it would start living a normal life. So I'm sitting here making a bouquet, and there was just something about forcing a new normal for my body to like train my body. That's not going to ever be the same. That's not home ever again. My husband, my former husband, our dog, the property, the home, like everything that I loved so much and invested so much into, all of a sudden it's gone. But if that's the only thing that my body knows as home, it's never going to allow me really to come to a place of normalcy and stasis and calm unless I go in and retroactively retrain my subconscious of what home looks, feels like, tastes like, sounds like. And so it is only with the utmost intentionality can we go in and retrain our subconscious of effectively, this is a new normal. You know, we look at all these people who go back to their abusers, and it's because that's what their body knows. That's what's familiar. That's what's safe. But if they don't ever take the time to do the reconciliation of effectively body, self, soul, spirit, that was unsafe for these reasons. Let me grieve that, process it. And then this is what safety looks like. Who was it? I was listening to, it was actually just this reel on social media. There was something about now, okay, so we need to unlearn the unhealth and unlearn the unsafe place. But then we need to imagine and begin kind of fixating on, okay, well, what does health actually feel like? What does safety feel like? And so in those moments of solitude and of quiet, that's where the relearning and the retraining comes into play. So the other night I talked about a vulnerability as effectively an arena, like Teddy Roosevelt talks about in his speech, The Man in the Arena. By way, it's so cool. By way of us effectively going into the arena every single day, we are able to teach and tell our bodies what safety feels like, what it looks like, what it sounds like. But we have to take the time and create the stillness and the space for us to be able to go into the arena, retrain our body, retrain our subconscious. It was so interesting. 3 times this week, once on the Craft and Calling podcast with Greg Boomer, once actually it's a pre-recorded show on the Knowing Show for next week, which I'm really, really excited about. I'll give you a hint. It's with Qasim Aslam. We did a pre-recording and it's going to go out live next week. We talked about it on there. And then also I was having a conversation with a client of mine who's a therapist, and we're planning out his next webinar with someone, executive coach from Harvard. We were having a conversation actually this morning, and 3 times in every single conversation, it has come up that it is so critically important that executives find and create the space for them to exist in stillness for the process of creation, for the process of growth, of healing. Every single conversation, from trades to Harvard executives, every single one of them emphasize the need for stillness. So why is it that we are so resistant to stillness? Why is it that there's like this sense of judgment over being still? And frankly, this is interesting. Do we actually judge it predicated in fear because we're actually terrified of what we'll find? Like that friend of mine who remembered when she finally went to therapy, she remembered that she was emotionally and sexually abused as a little girl, but it was only after 3 years of therapy. So there is something about fearing the stillness that we don't want to go and confront the truth that we may find. And so, y'all, when we think about what is the enemy of stillness, when we think about what is preventing me from going to that place and going into the arena, and I actually, we think about stillness, there's something about that actually I think isn't even the right way to put it, because really it's going into the arena and doing the work. It's not just going and humming and hawing at a meditation retreat, which I did once, and it was actually really good. But there's something about going and doing the work, which I think, there's a good reason for why our subconscious is resistant to it, because it doesn't know what it's going to experience. So the uncertainty of an in and of itself is actually the very thing preventing ourselves from feeling an inclination to go, because we don't know what we're going to experience. And our body, our survival instincts will do whatever it can. I talk about the 4 Fs, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. our body in its primal state will do anything to avoid uncertainty because it does not know what's going to happen. And so it lives in this type of like hyper awareness of, let me never put myself in a situation that I can't predict what the outcome is going to be. And so effectively it's, okay, if I know I'm going to go into the arena and I'm going to go do the work, how do I actually prepare myself subconsciously, and this is where the intelligences come into play, y'all. Our intellectual intelligence, our emotional, our spiritual, our physical intelligence. How are we effectively preparing each intelligence to go into that place and thus be prepared to encounter whatever it is that may come up, and we don't know what is going to come up for us. So as we're kind of thinking about these enemies of stillness, what are the enemies? And I'm going to change stillness to arena. What are the enemies of going into the arena and doing the work? Uncertainty. And the uncertainty is prevented. Y'all, I'm freaking trying to make a bouquet. And this is like a tree. I did not know I bought a tree. For those of you who are listening, it is literally like a branch. And I have scissors here and I cannot cut it. So I think I'm going to put my tree aside and maybe plant it in the ground. That is ridiculous. Anyways, so when we think about the enemies of what's going to be preventing us from entering the arena, uncertainty 100% is, but the uncertainty, the fear of what might happen takes on the kind of the covering and the protective mechanism of manifesting as these primal fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses. And so when we start thinking about going into the arena and we just feel that, like, this is why we actually need to know the senses in our body. So this was actually huge for me over the last couple of weeks. I never really understood why I needed to know where in my body I sensed discomfort. But as I've been leaning in and learning more about literally my physical body, my physique, literally the science behind it, I'm like, oh, if I feel discomfort in my stomach, below my ribs and literally like in my gut, I have a very different type of, my body is telling me something very different than if I feel the emotion kind of in my chest. Those are two very different responses. And I think tomorrow I might actually get into that a little bit about effectively how do we understand what our body is telling us based on where we sense the emotion. And y'all, we have to do this work. We have to understand, because otherwise we are going to be living life avoiding the truth, avoiding the very things that are going to propel us to healing and propel us to the growth that we need in order to get to the next level, in order to love better, in order to be the father and the mother that we want to be, in order for us to be the leader. Because y'all, imagine what it would be like if we actually had businesses with emotionally healthy, emotionally intelligent leaders, in addition to those who had high IQs. What a completely different world we would live in. So my bouquet is almost done. I don't know if you can see, but almost done. Thank you for joining me tonight.